Okay, y'all, I got a story time today, so we're gonna do it because I was recently diagnosed as being profoundly to severely deaf. And we're gonna talk about why this was never caught before my 30s. It's kind of interesting. Anyways, where did my headset? Okay. So, let me get set up and we'll get on to the story here. Okay, so starting out, I am adopted. I was adopted at, I was put into the foster care system at 18 months and adopted at the age of 2. My biological mother was not like, mother material, I guess you could say, was not Renee. And she would put me on this blanket and I would have to sit there all day. And if I moved, she would smack me in my head. Usually up the side of the head. And as a result of just not having the greatest care, I was almost 3 years old before I learned how to speak any more than the words no and shut up. And literally, those were my first words. Don't know which one came first, but the only words I could say when I came to my adoptive parents was no, shut up, and kind of my name. And, you know, it obviously affected me hearing-wise, but growing up, you know, it was more that people thought I just had selective hearing and was being belligerent. Turns out, as an adult, I was actually deaf. Sorry, I can't see without my glasses, which is like such a pain. You know, they give you like hearing tests throughout school, and I really don't know how this was just never caught, because I did do those hearing tests throughout school, and I can read lips quite well, actually. This is why I always say when people are like, you're staring at my mouth, why? Do you want to like kiss me or something? I'm like, no, I'm just reading what you're saying. But they caught my ADHD and my mental health issues, and they caught my vision problems, but hearing, for some reason, was just never caught. I don't know if it wasn't as bad when I was younger and it got worse as I got older, which I hear sometimes is the case, but they just never caught. I wasn't like great at the hearing test, but they never really caught it as being anything of severity. And then I met my wife, and she got tired of repeating herself all the time and of me not hearing her. So she insisted that I go take a hearing test, and turns out that I have like 80 decibels of hearing loss in my right ear and like 40 decibels of hearing loss in my left ear. So obviously one is more significant than the other, which makes sense, especially if, you know, the trauma that I heard to my head as a child was more significantly, which it was, to the right side of my head. Obviously it's going to be a little bit worse. Anyway, so I am actually getting my first set of hearing aids I'm going to say this month, because you'll see this on June 1st. So this month I will be getting my first set of hearing aids ever. And I'm like, and I have to have an MRI done to see if they think the trauma is bad enough that I need a cochlear implant in the right side, or if they think hearing aids will just be sufficient. And I'm really nervous about that. That's on June 7th, and I am so nervous about it. Like, I'm genuinely, like, afraid to have this MRI done. I don't want to find out that I need to have something implanted in my head. Obviously, if that's what I need, that's what I'm going to do, but it's like, I've had 2 major surgeries already within the last, like, 5 years of my life, and I really don't want another one that involves putting something inside my head. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I had all of my teeth pulled in July, I think 3 years ago, and I had a full hip replacement due to another birth defect that same year in October. Plus, this isn't like prime time because my wife is having surgery coming up in June. She's having surgery on June 18th. Her recovery process is like 6 to 8 weeks. So like I don't need to be having surgery while she's down too. So I'm like, just, I don't know, I'm like freaking out about it. But when I posted about it in one of my Facebook groups, I had somebody ask me how it was possible for my lack of hearing to go unnoticed for most of my life. I was born with bicongenital hip dysplasia, and that obviously was probably the most important thing as a child, because Renee, that's my bio mom, I will refer to her by name. My adopted parents, I will refer to them as my parents, and that is just because I don't want to put their names on the internet. But she's dead, so that's okay. She just did not, she didn't really take care of me. Like, literally the only reason she had me was in the hopes of keeping my bio dad around. And he's also deceased. I will refer to him by his name, Chris. That is who I am named after. That didn't work, and he still ended up leaving her because she cheated on him. I'm pretty sure she cheated on anybody and everybody she's ever been with, which honestly kind of sounds like my half-sister. Anyway, she just, and then, like, when he was gone, there was really no reason to have me anymore, but she would die before she gave me to my dad, because that would be like him winning in some way, because, you know, a child's well-being is worth whatever imaginary feud you're having in your head with somebody. And I don't know that he would have taken any better care of me. I have no way of knowing that. I have no way of stating for sure that he would have been a better parent or a worse parent or an average parent, because I was never put in that situation. Eventually, she got in trouble by my doctor for not taking me to my appointments for them to check on the progress of my hip, because they were trying a bunch of different things with my hip. So basically I had like a harness that didn't really work, and then they were trying like a brace and that didn't work, and she was just never taking me to get these things checked out. So they had no notation of progress on how these extra things that they were trying were helping, or if they were helping, before they did major surgery on basically an infant. But she would call me in, I guess, as sick a lot, and she would never take me to these appointments. And like, I was told that, like, and this is for my brother, half brother Mike. I was told this from him because he had all of those records and stuff from like social services and whatnot. But the doctor called her in for medical neglect because she was not doing what she needed to do. And this was not a matter of money, by the way. She was on welfare. She was always on welfare her whole life. So, and I obviously was on welfare and probably would have received Social Security had she signed up for it, due to being born that way. She just didn't want to take care of me. She didn't want to take care of any of us. She had 4 kids and didn't have custody of any of them. 4 kids that we know of. Anyway, but I feel like if anybody would know, it would be Mike, because he stayed with our grandmother at the time. So, like, I feel like if anybody really knew if she had any other kids, it would be Mike, because he was around her the most. But stranger things have happened. And, so then she was like forced to like take me to these appointments and whatnot, and I guess eventually she just got tired of having to actually physically take care of me, because I was not a low maintenance child. I was a child with a leg that physically did not work. Like, it was a dead leg, and that was because of the fact that I did not have a right hip socket. So when social services came to visit, she lit up a joint in front of the caseworker. And basically the caseworker was like, yeah, okay, it's clear you don't want this kid, so we're just going to take her. And we're going to put her in the system. I fortunately, and I know this is not the case for so many people, but I fortunately was put into a foster home with someone who already had dealt with special needs kids, so kind of knew like the kind of medical attention and stuff I was going to need. And then she went away for a seminar, and she sent me to stay with one of her friends because I was someone who needed constant medical attention, and she just did not feel like she would be able to give that to me while at this seminar. And so she had her friend watch me. Fortunately, they did not stay friends very long after this, but I was sent to live with my parents, and I was adopted shortly after. And I know this is not the case for so many people in the system, and I'm not trying to say like that this is how it's going to be for everybody, because it's not. I fortunately was very lucky and did not spend a large amount of time within the system. And I don't really have like trauma from the adoption, more like, I guess, growing up, I had like an identity crisis, and I did have some of the issues of like not knowing who I was, who I looked like, all of those things. Like they do take an impact on you, whether you know you're adopted, you don't know you're adopted. In my case, I knew. My parents chose not to hide that from me or my adopted brother. Now, they had 3 biological kids, and then they adopted my brother and I. This brother I do not speak to. Just for personal reasons, we're not close, and we probably never will be. I'm not really close to any of my siblings. I mean, I guess I'm kind of close with Mike, but other than that, I'm not really close with any of my siblings. I'm very much the, like, being the youngest too, and there being such a significant age gap between their bio kids and us and me is like serious. Like, it's just not conducive. I mean, my oldest sister's, how old is my oldest sister? 55? 56 is 56, and I'm 37. So, and yes, I do know my older sister's birthday. I just get the ages mixed up sometimes. And then, you know, I have a half sister, but let's be honest, she's a little cuckoo bananas. And she's just always tries to compete with me, and I get like some of that is sibling rivalry, but it's like we're adults. Like, you're in your 40s almost. Grow up. Just saying. I think there's like, so Mike is the oldest, and we have like 6 years and 2 days between us because his birthday is April 7th and mine is April 9th. Then we had Jody, who's one of the middle children, and she's like 2 years younger than him. And then there's Claude, who's 2 years younger than her. Middle sibling still not found. We don't know where he is or who he is. I mean, he could have been adopted out. We don't know. He did originally go with his dad, but I know his dad died when he was like 14, 15 years old. But there's also a record that maybe he was taken from his dad because of physical abuse, so we're not really sure where he is or where he ended up. And then there's me, and I was 2 years younger than Claude. So I'm like, I'm at the very bottom. And they get very interesting fact here. My bio dad and his wife had 2 boys, not had together, but had 2 boys. So they were her kids. And then my parents have 5 kids, including me, and I'm the baby of all the way around, like all the way around. I am the youngest across the board, which I guess makes it easier when you're like explaining to people, and they'll be like, oh, which sibling are you? And you don't have to be like, well, I'm the oldest in this one, and the youngest in this one, in the middle in this one. I'm the baby all the way around. I was the last kid. And I do have a half-brother on my biological father's side, on Chris's side. I'll just use his name, it's easier. On Chris's side, because well, because he had a kid. But he's deceased and is no longer with us. And anyway, so I went to my parents that I have now, and for just what was supposed to be a visit, and they ended up advocating to adopt me. And I guess for whatever reason, this pissed off the lady that, like, sent me there to stay, because I think she was talking about adopting me or something. And basically, it's like a bidding on children is basically what this sounds like. But basically, they won. And they had the money and the finances, and my dad had a great job. And, you know, so, like, they were thinking, oh, they can definitely provide the medical care that she's going to need. And also at this time, it was we were under the impression that I would need surgery on my hip, like a replacement, every year until I turned 18 or I stopped growing, which fortunately for me would have been about middle school. I really am not very tall. I'm only 5 feet tall, and I'm only 5 feet tall because they finally straightened out my legs, and they're the same length now. I was 4 foot and a half, 4 foot 11 and a half. And yes, growing up, that ½ inch was very important. Believe me, all my other short queens out there, you're going to know what I'm talking about. That ½ inch matters. And it's sad that you can't put that on your driver's license. Just saying. But anyway, so I ended up with them. And, you know, they fully adopted me. I had my second birthday with them. And I had my surgery that I needed to have to, you know, get my hip fixed. And, you know, I really flourished when I was finally adopted, because I was being taught how to speak, and I was being taught how to walk, and, you know, I loved to read, and even though I couldn't read, I loved books. And I had a good lifestyle, and I had an active lifestyle, and I had good parents, and I was in a good situation. And I know there are so many people out there who don't get that, or end up being in the system until they age out, and that devastates me, because I really wish everybody could be as lucky as I was. But, okay, so first grade, we discovered that I had a little difficulty reading, which, I mean, is probably not surprising, just considering the fact that I did not have, like, you know, a mother in the first few years of my life who would, like, read me stories at night to put me to bed, or, you know, stuff like that. So I had a little trouble reading, and my problem was not that I couldn't identify the words. So, like, if you had a sentence and it said, the cat is black, okay, for example, if you put your finger over every other word in that sentence but cat, I could tell you it was cat. I could tell you it was the. I could tell you it was black. I could tell you it was is. But once you took your hands away and I saw the whole sentence, I could no longer identify those words because they didn't look the same to me. So, in first grade, I was very, very lucky to get an amazing first grade teacher. I remember her to this day. She was Miss Kirk when I started, or Miss Bollinger when I started with her, and then she became Miss Kirk. And I had an amazing first grade teacher who taught me the love of reading, who taught me how to read, and really took her time with me. And this was back in the day when, you know, they actually cared about that kind of stuff, not the teachers, I mean the schools. But back in the day when that stuff actually mattered to people, and it wasn't just about passing children from one grade to another, there were teachers that genuinely cared about your abilities and the things you could do. And I'm not saying there's not today. Do not take it that way. My oldest sister is a teacher, and I'm telling you, she's a phenomenal teacher. She's an amazing person, and I know she would go out of her way to help any child that she could. She has worked with kindergartners, preschoolers, first graders, second graders, and special needs kids, and that takes a lot. I know it does. So don't come at me, okay? Because, like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying back in the day when actual school boards, not teachers, school boards cared about the matter of education and teaching. Yeah, I had some great teachers growing up, and I was very fortunate for that until I got to high school, and then they were kind of assholes, and they talked as much shit about the kids as the kids did. Geez, like, don't be putting Becky's business out there like that. And I say Becky like I wasn't the student they were talking about. Anyway, so first grade I had a really great teacher. She taught me how to read, like really taught me how to read. I did not have a great kindergarten or preschool teacher because they basically felt that with me showing signs of ADHD, that I was basically never going to learn how to read. That's what they told my mom. She's never going to learn how to read because she can't sit still long enough to follow along with the process. I was just bored, I guess. I don't know. But, like, I did not do well in preschool and kindergarten, which, I mean, I guess good thing those don't really count. But, you know. But then I got to first grade, and that was great. And, like, I was learning how to read and everything. And then, you know, like, second grade was great. I had a teacher in first grade, Mrs. Philpott. She was or second grade. She was a great teacher. She went on maternity leave, and we had Mrs. Banks. I don't really remember that much about her. I don't even know why I all of a sudden remember all of my teachers' names, but yeah. Third grade came, and I had one of my favorite teachers. Plot twist, my third grade teacher and my sixth grade teacher were the same person. And we're going to get into this. So third grade is when I discovered that I loved to write, right? And I started writing about that time, just random little stories. Like, I had in school, when I would have to write papers for like English class or creative writing, I had this whole little setup of these little blue-haired ladies. And, like, my mom helped me start it, but, like, I really took off with it, and I would use that anytime I had to do any kind of creative writing. And I would just tell different stories about them. Based on true facts, because, like, the first story I ever wrote was about this time that my brother and I got stuck in an elevator in Florida at Disney World. And, of course, you know, brothers, being brothers, he told me we were going to die. Because, let's be dramatic. And because I was little, so he was trying to scare me. And it wasn't hard to do, I was a kid. You know, like, but that was where I first came up with the story of not having my brother tell me that we were going to die, but these little ladies being in the elevator with us. And, you know, keeping me calm and whatnot. And that actually got me my very first A in English ever. And I was so excited about it. Fourth grade wasn't that great. I had Mrs. Alexander. That was the first time I ever got in trouble, though. Fourth grade was the first time I ever got in trouble. And that was because I signed my mom's name to my detention slip. And I wrote the L backwards because she writes in cursive. That was great. This is also around the time that they started noticing I had vision problems. This went from just small vision problems to copying down an entire board worth of math problems incorrectly. And don't get me wrong, like, I dislike math, but it was more frustrating and upsetting to me to have to do them twice because I copied them down wrong the first time. I was like, this is too much math for a girl who doesn't like math, okay? And that was also when we discovered that I had dyscalculia, and which is dyslexia but with numbers. Still a problem to this day. And then fifth grade, I had Mr. Cooley, and honestly, I do not remember much about this man, except that every girl in that class except me was in love with this teacher. And honestly, that should have probably been my first flag that I was gay. And then in sixth grade, like I said, I had the exact same teacher again. She taught English, and then I had a math teacher who I think her name was Mrs. Alexander. Not the same Mrs. Alexander from fourth grade, different Mrs. Alexander. And then we had a history teacher, Miss Mack, and the only reason I remember her is because I was scared of that lady. She looked mean as shit, but she was actually the nicest teacher I've ever met. She was such a sweetheart. She just looked like she hated everything and everybody. And then I had a science teacher, Mrs. Acton, and honestly, I love science, but I don't remember much about that science class except that the lady smelled like cigarettes. And I think the only reason I even noticed that is because I did not grow up around smokers. And, no, she's not yelling at me. In junior high, I did start getting reports from, like, my teachers. Don't ask me to remember any of my junior high teachers. I remember a couple, and they're probably not for good reasons. But in 7th grade, that was when they started stating that I had trouble listening in class, and I wasn't listening or I wasn't paying attention, when in reality I just couldn't hear what they were saying. In 8th grade, they decided at the end of 8th grade that I needed to be held back for a year because I was not catching on, and I was not listening, and I was not doing what I was told to do, again, because I couldn't hear them, but they didn't know that. They thought I was just being a brat. And because I was emotionally immature, I'm like, I mean, you would be emotionally immature too if every girl in this school was an absolute twat waffle. And I was told that I was antisocial, and I used to say growing up, I said, I'm not antisocial, I just don't like these bitches. I'm selectively social. Anyway, that was the first time, really, there was any indication that I either wasn't listening or couldn't hear. But like I said, it went undiagnosed for so fucking long because so many people thought it was just selective hearing on my part. And I'm like, and despite my complaints that I couldn't hear, or I didn't hear what they were saying, or I didn't understand, or whatever, they would be like, she's just not listening. She's being selective about what she hears. And I'm like, I wish it was that simple. Went through all of high school with the same reports. She's not listening. She's being selective about what she's listening to. High school, it took me until high school, by the way, to also get the IEP that I needed for math because I was just not good at math. I literally flunked out of geometry my 10th grade year. And it was only after that that they were like, hey, she's not very good at math. So let's see what we can do to improve that. For the record, I took algebra for the next 4 years of my life in high school. I could have done it as an expert by the end of senior year. Today, I could not do algebra if you paid me. I don't remember any of it. And to be honest, I've never had to use it in my everyday life. If you're a student watching me, that does not mean that you should not pay attention or participate in class. It's okay if you love math. It's okay if you don't love math. Please learn and pay attention. I'm just saying that I personally, as a stay-at-home mom and wife, I have never personally had to use algebra in my everyday life. My kid, however, loves math. She's a math genius. I personally would give somebody $10,000 if I never had to see another fucking math problem. And if I had $10,000. And, you know, as an adult, nobody really said anything about it. And I guess at this point I kind of learned how to read lips. And that's why I was always staring at people's mouths. And I have had so many of my boyfriend's moms point out, like, why is she staring at me like that? And I'm like, because I'm trying to understand what you're saying, but you fucking mumble and you don't enunciate, so I can't read your lips either. And after the baking powder, I have an antidote I'm going to share with you in the second part of this little video because it's great. But yeah, like, even as an adult, I couldn't hear, and like, I never said anything because I had personally become convinced that I did have selective hearing, and that I was just going to get yelled at if I said I couldn't hear it. So I was just like, yeah, okay, I don't know what I disagreed to, but hopefully it's not bad. Like, so yeah, even as an adult, I couldn't hear, and it just progressively got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I kind of feel bad for younger me because I wonder how much of my problems could have been solved if somebody had just taken the time to notice that I had a hearing problem and had not been so focused on my mental health issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they focused on those because I was diagnosed very young. At basically the age that they can finally diagnose you, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with BPD, and it changed my family relationship. It changed my perspective on life because I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew there was something wrong with me, and there was a name for it, and there was medication I could take for it. Also, if you have in your life one of these people, because I had this one, that's like, I don't want my kids to have to take medication for the rest of their lives. It's just mind over matter. First of all, just because you pretend like you don't have a mental illness doesn't, in fact, make that mental illness go away. And I think that that needs to be made very clear. That is just you in denial, sweetheart. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be there, and you're still going to have to face that one day. just saying, like, they say I'm bipolar, but I'm not bipolar because I don't think I'm bipolar is not what takes away your mental diagnosis. You're still bipolar. You're just pretending like it doesn't affect you in your everyday life, but the people around you are wishing you would go on medication and therapy. Intense therapy. If she ever sees this video, she's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, yeah. So if you're one of those people, please don't be one of those people, and please see a medical professional. Your family is probably secretly begging that you will eventually cave and go to therapy. So just saying, therapy isn't for everyone, but I would give it a shot. Or at least maybe a psychiatrist. Like, I would have paid this woman to go to therapy if it would have chilled her out and made her stop being such a twat all the time. And I'm using the word twat instead of the C word because last time I used the C word in a Facebook or YouTube video, they flagged me for inappropriate language. Which I personally think is very rude because you know what? In England, it's a term of endearment. You don't know where I'm from. Anyway, alright, I'm going to let this sit and then I'm going to come back and I will let you in on the other half of this anecdote I was going to talk about. So, we'll be back in a few minutes. So, anyway, I was talking about how it can be really hard to understand people or read their lips when they're mumbling or they don't enunciate. I have several friends who are not American. I have my friend Caitlin, the Americanized version of her name, excuse me, who has a Russian accent. It's not very prominent anymore. It was very strong as a kid, but it's not as prominent now that she's been in the U.S. most of her life. But I do have some Australian friends who have lived here for over 20 years, probably both of them for over 20 years. And in all honesty, they do not, if you're ever curious about this, do not lose their accent, like, at all. My Zumba instructor is Australian, and she's like, people say that my accent has gotten all Americanized, and I'm like, no, it hasn't. And do you have any idea how hard it is to say, understand what you're saying because you speak with an accent, so they don't enunciate the words the same way that we do? And I'm like, the fuck did you say? But one time she was talking about how she was talking about pictures, and we had told her that she looked really good in the pictures, and she said I looked horrid. And the way I heard it, it came out, and I was like, as opposed to soft, thinking she had said hard, and she was like, what? And I was like, you said you looked hard in the pictures. What does that mean? And she was like, I said horrid. But it's the way she said it that I was like, what? And I felt so bad for that because I was like, oh, two very different things there. And it happens. I do have trouble sometimes reading people's lips. Another thing that, like, is frustrating when you can't hear and people don't realize that you can't hear is that, oh my god, I just forgot what I was saying mid-sentence. It's just not unusual for me. Oh, is that most people don't realize that if you're not, like, in the same room with them, you can't hear what they're saying, but you also can't read their lips because they're in a different room. So I get yelled at a lot in this house because, well, not yelled at, but I get yelled for a lot in this house because I can't hear. So if they say my name in, like, a normal tone, I don't hear it, and then, like, I don't respond, and then they get frustrated, so then they yell my name because that's the only way I'm going to hear them. This is something my wife does quite often. I also will answer to anything else too. Sometimes if I think it sounds like baby or Christy, I will respond to it. And then sometimes I just don't hear it at all. It just really depends on how loud a person is being. Which is weird because most of my family is usually quiet. But when it comes to me, they can't be that way. So I guess I've made them more extroverted. Anyway. Oh. Huh? But yeah. And it was unfortunate too because when my mom had her lip surgery, she did not recover full feeling of her lip right away. And so when she would speak, I couldn't read her lips because of the fact that she wasn't able to speak clearly. And like, I felt so bad because there were so many times that I had no idea what that woman was saying to me. And I would just be like, yeah, hopefully you're not saying anything that's going to hurt your feelings because I don't know what you're saying. And I do think that my ability to read lips is why it went undiagnosed as an adult. I mean, even like at doctor's offices, it's not uncommon for people to say, okay, so what did you say I needed to do? Or like, you know, ask them to repeat instructions or diagnosis or whatever. It's not uncommon in doctor's offices. Because, what? Oh. But anyway, yeah, so it's not uncommon. And I think because I could read lips, that was like really beneficial for me. Honestly, the worst time I ever had was when COVID hit and everybody was wearing fucking masks. And you're just like, bruh, I have no idea what you're saying. Not only can I not hear you very well because now you're muffled behind a mask, but on top of that, I can't read your lips because I can't see them. COVID was so hard for me because because I had no way to kind of work around the mask issue because I couldn't hear, and add that to being muffled already behind a mask and then not being able to read lips. I really struggled during COVID with communication with other people because of that fact. Fun fact, I did not get COVID until after the epidemic ended. Like after we were all allowed out of our houses again, that's when I got COVID. Because leave it to me to be late to the party. But yeah, so that was really tough for me, not being able to like communicate. And like, and you know, people always want to say, well, why didn't you just learn sign language or use sign language? And I was like, well, because I didn't know I was actually deaf. I truly had believed at this point that I was just selectively listening, but I didn't know how to turn it on and off, which probably should have been my first clue as to the fact that it was not selective hearing. I genuinely couldn't hear. But I let other people convince me that I was just being bratty and didn't want to listen. That was not the case, for the record. In case you haven't caught on to the story yet, that was not the problem. Sorry, you gotta give me a second to do this. It's hard to talk and do these little dot things. Okay, I gotta let these dry. Just give me a second. Okay. So, yeah, like, it was really hard. And I was terrified when I went for this hearing test as an adult. Like, I literally just went, like, a month or so ago. And I was so afraid to go because I was like, what if I really can't hear? What if this is really a problem? What if it's not just selective hearing? And I was like freaking out because I was like terrified that like I was gonna find out there was something really wrong with me. Turns out I'm just deaf. But like, as like a child that comes from like a rough background, being, you know, adopted and whatnot, you like wonder, like, did she really like just fuck me up? Because like I didn't have enough emotional, mental, physical health issues and or trauma apparently that we needed to also add in slapping me so hard upside the head repeatedly that I went deaf. Like, to the point that this MRI is to see if my eardrum has completely detached from my ear on my right side, or if it's just damaged or impacted. And, like, that's scary to think about. Like, did you really just abuse me so badly as an infant for the 18 months that you had me, that you, like, potentially permanently damaged my eardrum? And obviously the answer is yes. And that's, like, really hard to accept because it's just like, what did I ever do? I was just a baby. I didn't do nothing to nobody. And, like, it can really, like, make you question yourself. And be like, why? What did I do to you, you know? I was just a kid. And all this because your man left you. Alright, I gotta get dressed and then I'm gonna finish this video out. So, be right back. So basically, just to round out this video and call it done, I have finally gotten an answer for my hearing problems. And at some point in June, you'll be seeing me for the very first time with my very first set of hearing aids. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me and listening to me talk. As always, please have a good day. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Be cautiously kind to others. And make good choices. Bye.